We've all felt powerless. Those moments when everything seems beyond our control, a sudden criticism, an unforeseen event, or a vague sense of emptiness without clear cause. But what if we changed our perspective? What if, instead of letting circumstances dictate us, we chose to master our response? Stoicism is not some distant philosophy of ancient Greece. It is a living blueprint for the modern age, where self-mastery, inner strength, and the ability to transform suffering into strength become our ultimate weapons. Today, we will explore 12 Stoic principles that can change your life instantly if you dare to live with full awareness and courage. 1. Mastering your response. This is where freedom begins. There is a truth we often forget in the rush of life. We cannot control everything that happens to us, but we can always control how we respond. And it is right there, in that choice of response, that inner freedom begins. Think of a morning when you're late for work because of traffic. The cars don't move, but the clock does. You can pound the steering wheel, curse the world, blame everything. But then what? Stress, frustration, exhaustion, and the situation remains the same. But if, in that very moment, you realize you have another option, everything shifts. Instead of boiling over, you can play a useful podcast, slow your breath, and treat the moment as a chance to be alone, reflect, or simply rest. Mastering your response doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. No. Emotions are real. Anger, disappointment, pain, they're all part of being human. But Stoicism teaches, do not let the first emotion dictate the second action. You can feel everything, but act with reason, not impulse. We don't have to become emotionless machines, immune to every blow, but we must learn to pause before we react. A small space between stimulus and action. That is where wisdom is forged. In daily life, this sounds simple, but it's truly an art. When someone criticizes us in front of others, our instinct is to defend, to strike back. But if we notice that moment, that racing heart, the heat in the throat, and choose silence or respond with calm, we are building not just self-control, but dignity. Here's an irony. Those who react the fastest, the strongest, are often the least free, because they were constantly ruled by the outside. Praise, criticism, looks, tones, texts. They live like leaves in the wind. In contrast, the one who responds deliberately, who chooses their battles, is the one who commands their mind, and from that, commands their life. Mastery of response is not innate, but it is trainable. Every day, we get hundreds of small chances to practice. When someone cuts in line, when the kids get noisy, when an email goes unanswered. These things don't ruin our day. It's how we react that can ruin it. And the truth is, when we learn to respond from within, rather than be driven by the external, our inner strength grows quietly but steadily. That is true freedom. Not being a slave to emotion, not reacting out of habit, but acting as the person we aim to become. Just imagine, if this morning, instead of snapping at a coworker, you chose to listen calmly and reply with respect. Would your day be different? If in a heated argument, you didn't need to win but only to understand, might that relationship deepen? Inner freedom begins with the smallest acts. Holding bow is sharp word, taking one extra breath before replying, choosing behavior aligned with values, not fleeting emotions. And then one day, you realize the little things no longer shake you. A criticism no longer steals your sleep. A setback no longer makes you want to give up. It's not because the world has changed, but because you have changed how you live in it. 2. The obstacle doesn't block the path. The obstacle is the path. We often think that if life runs smoothly, if everything goes according to plan, we'll be happy, successful, and at peace. But reality rarely plays along. Life always finds ways to be harder than expected. Doors that once seemed certain suddenly close. People we trust may walk away. And honest efforts sometimes end in failure. Hardship makes us feel stuck. But what if we shifted our perspective? What if the obstacle itself is pointing us toward a new path? One we had never considered. The Stoic does not see adversity as the enemy, but as an essential part of the journey toward inner strength. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they ask, "What can I learn from this?" That single shift opens a new way forward, the path of the doer, the path of growth, the path of purpose. Think back to the hardest times in your life. Being laid off, a failed business, a broken relationship. In those moments, you may have felt crushed, but with time, many of us look back and realize it was precisely that hardship that led to something better. A friend of mine spent his youth chasing the dream of becoming an artist. He gave it everything: his time, money, passion. After nearly a decade, he failed. He lost everything and returned to square one, empty-handed. He spiraled into crisis, lost all direction. But instead of drowning in despair, he began writing about his journey, not to complain, but to understand himself more deeply. Those pages, over time, became a widely read book. Today, he's no longer a stage performer, but an author who inspires thousands. Without that failure, he might never have discovered who he truly was. That story reminds us every obstacle is a disguised doorway. The question is whether we have the courage to walk through it. When facing hardship, our instinct is to avoid, delay, or blame. But it is only by confronting and moving through challenges that we truly grow. No challenge, no progress. A muscle untrained remains weak. And so it is with the mind. It strengthens only through trial. To apply this principle, begin by changing the way you interpret adversity. Each time you meet an obstacle, ask, "What is this challenge trying to teach me?" Or, "Who might I become if I overcome this?" These questions shift you from victim thinking to a mindset of growth. Also, develop the habit of journaling about your struggles. Write down how you responded, the lessons you gained, and the emotions you felt afterward. This not only helps you reflect on your journey, but lays a foundation for facing future trials with greater calm. Understand this: no one matures through ease. The strongest people we admire are often those who've endured pain, failure, and loss. But they didn't let those things break them. They used the cracks to let the light of growth in. And one final point, perhaps the most important: when you face a challenge, don't ask, "How can I escape this as fast as possible?" Ask, "Who can I become because of this?" That is how we turn adversity into leverage. That is how a Stoic lives. And that is how we turn a path strewn with stones into a road of quiet strength. 3. Live fully in the present, for this moment is all we truly have. We live in an age where the mind rarely rests in the present. Though our body is here, our thoughts drift elsewhere, either regretting the past or fearing what's ahead. And so, we miss the one thing we actually possess: this moment. Living in the present doesn't mean denying the past or rejecting the future. It means cherishing the now as the most precious gift, because everything we can do, change, love, forgive, begin again, can only happen here and now. Picture a quiet afternoon walk in the park. If your mind is tangled in unfinished tasks, worries about tomorrow, or stories from last week, do you truly see the sunlight filtering through the trees? Hear the birds? Feel your breath moving in and out? Most often, the answer is no. You were there, but not really there. Stoic philosophy teaches that presence in each moment is the foundation of a meaningful life. For all that truly matters, peace, joy, connection, arises from our ability to be here. A warm embrace, an understanding gaze, a shared silence with someone you love, only become real when we're fully present, heart wide open. We often postpone happiness to some distant point. When I have enough money, when I succeed, when I'm recognized. But every time we set conditions on joy, we push it further away. That cycle never ends. Meanwhile, true happiness begins when we stop and feel content with what we already have, no matter how small. One practical way to train presence is through daily actions. When drinking a cup of tea, drink as if it were your last. Feel the warmth. Notice the scent. Taste the subtle bitterness on your tongue. When talking with someone, put your phone aside, look into their eyes, and listen with full attention. When working, do one task at a time, instead of jumping between tabs. These small acts have the power to quietly transform the quality of our lives. Another habit that anchors us in the present is practicing gratitude. Each morning, take 1 minute to think of 3 things you are grateful for right now. A good night's sleep, early sunlight, or simply the fact that you're alive and have another chance. That's enough to shift your mind from scarcity to sufficiency. Of course, living fully in the present isn't easy, especially when the past still lingers and the future feels uncertain. But whenever the mind is, the key isn't to criticize ourselves, but to gently call it back. Like training a puppy, not with anger or urgency, but with patience, kindness, and quiet repetition. And then, something remarkable happens. When we are present, time seems to slow down. Everything becomes clearer, deeper. We are no longer swept along like a leaf in the current, but become the one steering the boat, living consciously, with clarity, and in true connection with ourselves and others. Living fully in the present isn't mystical or far away. It begins with the simplest acts, being mindful of what we're doing, whether it is washing dishes or walking outside. It is a gentle reminder to return to ourselves and to discover the peace we've been chasing elsewhere all along. 4. Self-discipline, the golden framework for inner freedom. Freedom is a concept that many misunderstand. We often think freedom means doing whatever we want, without restriction, without interference. But the Stoic sees freedom through a different lens. True freedom only comes when we know how to discipline ourselves. Sounds like a contradiction? How can one be disciplined and free at the same time? But think about it. When we stay up late night after night, eat without restraint, speak without thinking, abandon our commitments, are we truly free? Or are we slaves to habit, impulse, and the quiet inertia within? Self-discipline is not repression, nor is it harsh rigidity. It is the act of choosing what is right, even when it's difficult. When we discipline ourselves, from waking up on time, staying committed to our goals, to pausing in the face of anger, we're doing something essential, keeping our promises to ourselves. And nothing builds inner strength more than keeping a promise to yourself. Imagine you are the architect of your own life. Without a clear blueprint, without the discipline to lay each brick, the structure is bound to collapse. But when each action, each choice is made with awareness and commitment, then slowly, you begin laying a solid foundation for a meaningful life. Self-discipline is also how we free ourselves from dependence on the approval of others, on fleeting pleasures, on highs that end in emptiness. The disciplined person knows when to say no, when to pause, and when to act, not because someone said so, but because they have chosen to live by a certain set of values. Let's begin with the smallest things. You don't need to change your life overnight. Just start by going to bed on time, resisting the urge to check your phone first thing in the morning, or finishing a task you've long postponed. Each small act is a brick in the fortress of the soul. a sanctuary in a world of chaos. There will be days when we fall short, days when laziness wins, moments when temptation overpowers will. But the disciplined person is not flawless. They are the one who knows how to rise again, to begin anew, and not let one misstep ruin the entire path. In reality, successful people aren't those who always feel motivated. They're the ones who act without waiting for inspiration. They set principles and follow through. Rain or shine, seen or unseen. That is inner strength, the quiet power of a will shaped by small, consistent choices. Self-discipline also brings confidence, not because we're certain things will go our way, but because we know that no matter what happens, we won't give up. That feeling, being able to trust yourself, is a quiet but unshakable kind of power. And then, true freedom appears, no longer swayed by fleeting emotions, no longer trapped in regret or delay, no longer afraid of failure, because we know we'll act in alignment with the values we've chosen. This isn't easy freedom. It is earned, built from the inside out, resilient, lasting, and untouchable. 5. Master your emotions. Don't let them master you. Emotions are what make us human, vivid, deep, and connected. But those same emotions, if left unchecked, can become a force that teaches us to react poorly, say things we'll regret, do things that betray our values, and lose ourselves in a moment of chaos. The Stoic does not deny emotion. They don't aim to be cold or detached. What they practice is mastery, the ability to notice emotions as they arise, understand them, and choose a deliberate response, rather than being swept away like a rudderless boat in a storm of feelings. We've all been there. A word that makes our blood boil, a message that tightens our chest, a small disappointment that ruins the whole day. In those moments, emotion doesn't just appear. It dominates what we do, say, and think. And when we let emotion lead, we tend to act from impulse rather than from reason and a principle. So how do we master emotions without suppressing them? First, we must allow ourselves to feel. Many people confuse emotional control with repression, pushing feelings down, pretending nothing is wrong. But no, emotional mastery begins with the courage to face what we feel and name it truthfully. I'm angry. I'm sad. I feel envious. This doesn't make us weak. On the contrary, it takes inner strength to confront our emotional truth. Once we've recognized the emotion, the next step is to pause before we respond. There must be space between feeling and action, even if it's just a few seconds. In that pause, we can choose again. We can ask ourselves, will this reaction help? Does it bring me closer to who I want to be? It's in that moment of pause that true strength reveals itself. A simple example: when someone says something hurtful, our instinct is to retaliate, to snap back, lash out, or retreat in silent resentment. But if we breathe, acknowledge the sting, and then choose a response rooted in reason and kindness, not only is the relationship preserved, but we ourselves grow stronger inside. Mastering emotion is also learning not to identify with every fleeting feeling. One burst of anger doesn't make us angry people. One moment of weakness doesn't mean we're worthless. Emotions are guests. We can welcome them, but they don't get to run the house. In daily life, meditation is a powerful tool for training emotional awareness. But even without formal practice, we can use moments of noticing at any time. For example, when envy flares up at someone's success, pause and ask, what is this emotion revealing about what I lack? Or, can I turn this feeling into motivation rather than bitterness? Mastering emotion not only helps us avoid mistakes, it paves the way for emotional growth. We learn when to speak, and when to stay silent, when to forgive, and when to let go. We no longer let emotions drive our lives. We begin to live with intention and wisdom. And finally, always remember, emotions are signals, not commands. We are not victims of our feelings, nor are we their enemies. We are their masters, the ones who can feel, choose, and navigate the inner storms with a compass called reason. 6. Memento Mori. Remember, you will die. Only by facing death can we truly learn to live. We often avoid death, as if mentioning it is taboo. But the Stoic, in contrast, faces death with clarity, not to invite despair or fear, but to live more deeply, more intentionally, and with greater purpose each day. This is the essence of Memento Mori. Remember, you will die. Sounds grim? In truth, it's one of the most awakening principles. For only when we confront the limits of our time do we begin to cherish what is here and find the courage to stop postponing our lives. Each morning, how many of us truly think, today could be my last? Likely very few. And because of that, we assume there's time. We delay apologies, postpone calls of affection, and let our dreams gather dust in the drawers of our soul until time runs out, and we realize that procrastination, not death, was the real thief of life. Memento Mori doesn't call us to live recklessly, but to live with choice, with intention, and with meaning. When every moment could be our last, even the smallest things matter. The embrace of a loved one, the words we leave behind, the way we look at a stranger. Instead of asking, what do I want to achieve this year? The Stoic asks, if today were my last, how would I live? That question doesn't create pressure. It creates clarity. It makes us pause, strip away the trivial, and focus on what is truly worth living for. There's a simple story that has lingered in my mind. A man, after surviving a serious accident, saw life differently. Before, he was always busy, irritable with his family, putting off trips and dinners. But after nearly dying, he began to slow down and show up. He no longer waited for the weekend to show love, for special occasions to laugh, or for a reason to be grateful. He learned that death doesn't wait for us to be ready. So we must live as if every day could be our farewell. Memento Mori also teaches us to let go of what isn't worth carrying. When life is short, we don't waste it on resentment, envy, or regret. We learn to forgive, not because others deserve it, but because we deserve peace. We learn to stay silent during petty arguments, not out of weakness, but because time is too precious to win battles that don't make us better. And from another view, death isn't an end. It's a reminder that we're alive, that we still have time to begin, to love, to forgive, to change, and to rewrite the next chapter with greater meaning. We don't need to obsess over death, but we must at times pause and ask, if this were the last time I did this, how would I do it? Not to instill fear, but to deepen our presence, our truth, and our appreciation for what matters. Memento Mori doesn't steal hope. It makes each hope more valuable. It doesn't rob us of faith. It refines our faith in what truly deserves it. It doesn't pull us into darkness. It lights the way forward with presence and gratitude. And when we live as if tomorrow is not guaranteed, every step we take today carries extraordinary weight. Life is no longer a string of empty days. It becomes a journey with purpose, depth, and nothing wasted. 7. Practicing gratitude. Realizing we already have enough. It's not about having more, but seeing what's already here. In our pursuit of a better life, we often focus on what we don't yet have. A better job, a more fulfilling relationship, more money, more time, more freedom. But this constant sense of lack we impose on ourselves is the root of much exhaustion, comparison, and unease. That is why gratitude, seemingly simple, holds such transformative power. Practicing gratitude doesn't mean denying our rightful desires in life. It's a way of seeing what already exists, rather than obsessing over what's missing. It's a gentle reminder. Things may not be perfect, but there is still much to be thankful for. We can begin with what seems small: a roof above our heads, a warm meal, a friend who listens, or simply a body that still breathes, a heart that still beats. When we return to the present and see each of these with gratitude, the mind shifts from scarcity to sufficiency. The Stoics taught that we should be grateful not only when life is good, but also in hardship, because in adversity, gratitude becomes the lantern that keeps us from being swallowed by the dark. When life turns against us, if we can still learn from it, still have someone by our side, or even just time to begin again, that is already a precious gift. Try imagining your day, beginning with writing down 3 things you are grateful for. No matter how small: the soft light of morning, birdsong on the balcony, a message from someone you love. It takes only minutes, yet it can recalibrate your entire state of mind. Instead of chasing after more, you begin your day grounded in the sense that you already have enough. Gratitude doesn't come from having a lot. It comes from recognizing the worth of what we already have. Often, it's only after loss that we realize how lucky we once were. So why not practice noticing it while it's still here? There's a story I once heard about a woman who recovered from a life-threatening illness that forever changed how I see life. She said the thing she missed most in the hospital wasn't the pain, but the scent of morning coffee, the wind through her hair, and the laughter of her child running through the house. The things we experience every day, too ordinary to notice, until loss teaches us their value. We don't need to wait for loss to learn that lesson. Gratitude can be practiced daily, and the more we practice, the steadier the mind becomes. Less complaining, less comparing, more calm. When gratitude becomes part of our way of living, we start to see the world through different eyes. People are no longer rivals to outpace, but fellow travelers, struggling, striving, and needing kindness just as we do. Gratitude not only softens our spirit, it warms the world around us. And most importantly, gratitude anchors us to the present. It pulls us out of the past we cannot change, away from the future that hasn't arrived, and places us squarely here, where so much is already waiting to be felt, loved, and appreciated. We don't need everything to feel complete. We only need to open our hearts, open our eyes, and realize sometimes what we've been searching for all along has always been right here. 8. Pursue personal excellence, not perfection. There's a common mistake many of us make. We believe that to become the best version of ourselves, we must be perfect. No flaws, no failures, no moments of weakness. But perfection is an illusion. It doesn't exist. And the more we chase it, the further we drift from who we truly are. What we should strive for is not perfection, but personal excellence, the unwavering effort to become a better version of ourselves, one day at a time. The Stoics didn't seek perfection. They focused on living by core values: integrity, courage, wisdom, and temperance. And they understood that becoming such a person is a lifelong process. It never ends. There is no finish line, only continuous refinement. We don't need to measure our worth by comparing ourselves to others. The only comparison that matters is between who we are today and who we were yesterday. Were we a little more patient today? Did we listen a bit more? Were we less reactive? If the answer is yes, then that is progress on the path of excellence. And most importantly, excellence is not an outcome. It is a way of choosing how to live each day. Picture a sculptor. They don't create a masterpiece in a single strike. They return each day, carving, adjusting, refining. Likewise, every decision we make, every mindful action, from keeping a promise, completing a small task, to facing discomfort instead of avoiding it, is a chisel mark, shaping who we are becoming. Personal excellence requires honesty with ourselves. It means admitting when we're wrong, correcting our course when we've strayed, and learning constantly from our missteps. The one who never fails isn't superior. They are simply someone who never dared to try. We must release the expectation of getting everything right from the start. Instead, we allow ourselves to try, to fail, to learn, to adjust, and to move forward. Each time we rise after falling, each time we choose our values over ease, we draw closer to the person we aspire to be. What's remarkable is that the pursuit of excellence doesn't need to be loud or noticed. True strength requires no applause. Integrity demands no spotlight. Personal excellence is quiet, steady, and precisely because of that, it's powerful. I once met a teacher who wasn't famous and held no high title, yet everyone who met him respected him deeply, not because he was perfect, but because he lived true to his values, always on time, always listening, always keeping his word, and always learning. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was simply himself, just a little better each day, and that inspired more than any grand speech ever could. Each of us can become that kind of person. We don't need recognition, and we don't need to be flawless. We only need to be honest with our path and committed to living what we believe. And if there's one reminder worth carrying into every day, it is this: today, I will choose to live as someone training in excellence. No need to be great right away. No need to be admired. Just be honest, persistent, and kind with yourself. Because in the end, our lives are not defined by rare flashes of brilliance, but by how we live on the ordinary days when no one is watching. And it's in those chaos to unseen moments that true excellence is forged, silently, steadily, step by step. 9. Let go of external control. True freedom begins here. We grow up in a world where recognition and applause are treated as measures of self-worth. From an early age, we learn to please, good grades to earn praise, proper behavior to be accepted, even choosing a career, not out of passion, but to make our parents proud. And just like that, bit by bit, we learn to live by the expectations of others until we forget the voice within. But at some point, when exhaustion builds up, when the sense of losing ourselves seeps into daily life, we must ask, whose life am I really living? This is where Stoic thinking steps in. The Stoics understood one thing clearly: everything external, praise, approval, glances, lies beyond our control. And when we let our emotions, behavior, or even happiness depend on those things, we unknowingly give away the reins of our life to someone else. True freedom isn't about getting whatever we want. It begins the moment we release our grip on what isn't ours to control and return to the only domain we fully own: ourselves, our mind, our actions, our values, our choice. That is the ground where our authority lies. A common example: have you ever posted something meaningful on social media only to have your mood dictated by likes or comments? If someone agrees, you're happy. If no one responds, you feel deflated. Even a single scene can rattle your peace. Why? Because you've tied your worth to something outside your grasp. The Stoics would act differently. They write because it feels right. They share because it aligns with their values. They do not let others' reactions dictate their inner course, because they know that living by personal principles is the highest form of freedom, free from being dragged by every passing opinion, free from living a script written by society. Letting go of external control doesn't mean apathy or irresponsibility. It simply means doing the right thing because it's right, not because it's praised, nor to avoid criticism. And that's the root of peace. Because then, we're no longer shaken by every shift in the outside world. We can stand firm, like a tree rooted deep in the earth, even as the winds rage around us. To practice this, we can start by asking ourselves daily, who am I doing this for? Do I truly want this? Or am I just afraid of being judged? When we begin to answer honestly, we slowly separate what is truly ours from what is borrowed pressure. And remember, no one else can live our life for us. No one else carries the weight of our emptiness if we don't live authentically. So why let others make decisions on our behalf? The Stoic chooses freedom, and that freedom is kvistet, needing no display. It is the stillness within, knowing you're living in alignment with your values, whether or not anyone applauds. In the end, when we release the need for approval, we suddenly realize we don't need to please anyone to feel enough. We only need to live rightly, honestly, responsibly, and with courage. Freedom does not come from controlling the world. Freedom begins when we stop letting the world control us. 10. Embrace change, transform rather than resist. Change is inevitable in life. No matter how carefully we plan, unexpected events still arise. A job ends, a relationship breaks, something we thought was certain suddenly disappears. And in those moments, our first reaction is often resistance. Why me? Why can't things stay the same? I can't handle this. But the truth is, life doesn't ask our permission before it changes. It moves forward, without warning, without command. And the only thing we can control is how we respond to that change. The Stoics understood this law of life. They didn't try to keep everything the same. Rather than fighting the current, they learned to swim with it and to transform themselves in the process. He says, we often suffer, not because of change itself, but because we cling to the expectation that things should stay as they were. That attachment, that it should have been different, is the source of so much inner turmoil. But once we let go of expectation, of the past, of the need to control, we finally open ourselves to transformation. Change can be painful, especially when it carries a sense of loss. But every disruption carries a hidden invitation, an opportunity to grow, to reflect, to reshape who we want to become. We may lose a job, only to discover a passion we had long buried. One door may close, only so another, previously unconsidered, can be opened. I remember a friend who was forced to leave the city she'd lived in for nearly 10 years. She resisted fiercely, feeling wronged and disoriented. But after relocating to a quiet town, she started gardening, slowed her pace, and realized that this very change had pulled her out of the cycle that had silently worn her down for years. Today, she's grateful for what she once called a crisis. Embracing change doesn't mean we're always happy about it. Sometimes it comes with pain, with tears, with sleepless nights. But the point is not to let the pain freeze us. Instead, we allow ourselves to feel it fully, then slowly raise and ask, what can I learn from this? Who is this change calling me to become? A vital part of transformation is accepting reality as it is. No sugarcoating, no denial. The truth may be hard, but only in facing it clearly can we make wise choices. And it is in that moment, when we're forced to adapt, reshift, even reinvent ourselves, that true inner strength is born. We can practice embracing change daily by starting with the small things. When plans fall apart, when someone disagrees with us, when what we hoped for doesn't happen, each time is an opportunity to pause, breathe deeply, and choose to respond with awareness, rather than impulse. Change is not the enemy. It is a silent teacher. It doesn't say much, but it always shows up at the right moment, pushing us out of comfort so we can meet a version of ourselves we hadn't yet discovered. And one day, we'll look back and see that what once felt like loss was actually a turning point, that what we once feared led us exactly where we needed to go. When we stop resisting the current, we begin to swim in our own way, strong, calm, and deeply aligned. 11. Compassion, the core of inner strength. When we think of strength, we often picture resilience, toughness, and the ability to stay untouched by emotion. But on the journey toward depth and self-mastery, we soon realize true strength doesn't come from being cold or indifferent, but from the ability to love while in pain, to remain gentle in adversity, and to choose compassion in moments that most invite anger. Compassion, a virtue often seen as soft, is, in fact, the essence of the truly strong. Because it's easy to judge, but hard to understand. It's easy to react with anger, but it takes real courage to choose forgiveness, patience, and empathy. The Stoics, though focused on rational living and emotional discipline, never dismissed the value of kindness. On the contrary, they understood that as human beings, we are not meant to live in isolation. Life gains meaning when we connect, when we share, and when we recognize that the pain of another somehow touches our own. When we choose compassion, we don't do it because the other person deserves it. We do it because we refuse to let hatred distort our own heart. Every time we hold on to resentment and bitterness, we allow negative emotions to occupy space in our minds, tightening the soul, closing the heart. But when we learn to understand, to forgive, to open up, we are the first to be set free. Think back to a time you were angry with someone because they wronged you, because they hurt you. You may have yelled, blamed, or gone silent in cold withdrawal. But how did it feel afterward? Was it emptiness? Was it heaviness? The truth is, anger may feel justified in the moment, but compassion is what endures. Compassion isn't just for others. It's the greatest gift we can offer ourselves, because all of us have made mistakes, have had weak moments, have said or done things we regret. When we learn to understand others, we're also creating space for our own healing. Compassion is the maturity of the heart, and especially in a world full of judgment, competition, and disconnection, compassion is more necessary than ever. Sometimes a kind look, a simple, "Are you okay?" or a moment of non-judgmental listening can change someone's day or even their life. I once witnessed a friend care tenderly for his mother, who suffered from dementia. She often forgot everything, repeated herself, sometimes didn't recognize her own son. Yet instead of frustration, he responded with gentle laughter and answered her as if for the first time. He once told me, "Each day she forgets a little more, but if today she can still smile at me, that's enough." That is compassion, not pretty words, but patient action in difficult moments. We don't need grand gestures to be kind. We only need to remember that everyone is fighting a battle we cannot see. When we understand that, we begin to react less harshly, judge less quickly, and approach others with more softness, even in thought. Compassion doesn't make us weak. It helps us keep our hearts whole in a world that can be harsh. It is the mark of a strong mind, unshaken by anger, unbroken by cruelty, and steady enough to choose kindness, even when others may not deserve it. And in time we'll realize, every act of compassion we offer not only nourishes others, it also plants peace within ourselves, and that is the most enduring kind of strength. 12. Daily self-reflection, a mirror for the soul. In a world that moves fast and speaks loudly, it's easy to be swept away by the current of busy days, the things to do, the goals to chase, the expectations to meet. And in that whirlwind, The one thing often left behind is ourselves, unacknowledged emotions, unchecked actions, and values that begin to fade into the background. That's why the Stoics saw daily self-reflection not just as a habit, but as a sacred ritual, not a harsh self-judgment, but a quiet return to oneself, to observe, to adjust, and to grow. If we see each day as a small journey, then self-reflection is the inner compass. It helps us see whether we're still on course, whether we've taken a wrong turn, or drifted from the values we truly hold dear. No one lives rightly 100% of the time, but by simply pausing each day and asking honestly, did I live in alignment with what I believe today? We create a natural system of course correction. That simple question, asked with honesty over time, becomes a mirror for the soul, revealing what to keep, what to change, and what to let go. One practical way to practice this is through end-of-day journaling. It doesn't need to be poetic, just a few honest lines. What did I do today that made me proud? What didn't feel quite right? What would I do differently if I had the chance? These small entries become precious markers on our path of personal growth, because over time, when we look back, we'll see how far we've come, not by luck, but by awareness, cultivated little by little, day after day. I once had a friend who kept this habit for years. Every night, no matter how busy, he spent 10 minutes reviewing his day. Some entries were joyful. Others he wrote about his disappointments with himself. But it was the imperfect days that taught him the most. He said, "Each line I write is a moment I choose to look myself in the eye, not avoiding, not sugarcoating." And I believe it was that honesty that made him quietly resilient, deeply grounded, and profoundly self-aware. Self-reflection doesn't turn us into harsh critics or people obsessed with flaws. On the contrary, it helps us live lighter because we no longer carry unfinished thoughts that go unacknowledged. We dare to face them, learn from them, and move forward with greater clarity. And when practiced long enough, each day becomes a complete unit, not drifting by in a blur, but grounded, purposeful, and intimately connected to our inner world. Most importantly, self-reflection cultivates a quality that is becoming rare in the modern world: self-awareness. The person who can look inward is not easily lost, not easily shaken by life's turns. They don't rely excessively on outside advice because they have a companion within, a quiet presence that observes, corrects, and nurtures their becoming. And if there's one thing worth doing at the end of each day, it is this: to take a few minutes to sit still and face yourself. Not to judge, but to understand. Because in the end, a meaningful life is not defined by moments of glory, but by how we live each day, each choice, each time we dare to look inside and say, "Today I wasn't perfect, but I'm moving toward better." Stoicism isn't something to read for inspiration and then set aside. It is a philosophy meant to be practiced daily in every small action. For me, the simplest starting point is the morning. Each day, instead of reaching for my phone the moment I wake, I take a few minutes to breathe deeply and remind myself, today may not be perfect, but I will choose how I respond. Just a simple reminder, yet it allows me to begin the day with awareness rather than being swept away. We don't need to change the world to practice Stoicism. All it takes is staying calm in traffic, being more patient during conversations with loved ones, or finally completing a task we've been procrastinating on. That is living Stoicism, not in theory, but in how we behave, think, and choose. And with steady practice, I've come to see one clear truth: life hasn't gotten easier, but I've become stronger. And that is a change no circumstance can take away, because it comes from within, from my own choices made each day. Together, we've walked through 12 Stoic principles, not to memorize, but to live, to practice, and to let them shape us day by day. None of us is perfect, but if each morning we choose to be a little more mindful, a little more composed, and a little more honest, that alone is a victory. If this message resonates with you, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss future reflections. Every time you follow, we take one more step together in spreading the power of awareness and self-mastery. And remember, life does not ask us to be perfect. It only asks that we have the courage to be fully ourselves. See you in the next video.